Hello and welcome to this video in which we'll be discussing the solutions to the questions of a passage from CAT 2023 slot 2. This is the passage on liberalism. I have already completed a video before this in which I have discussed how to read the passage and what information is supposed to be taken away from the passage after finishing reading it. Do watch that video before you watch this one, then the solutions will make a lot more sense. Also, please make sure that before you watch solution videos, you try out the exercises yourself. It will add a lot of learning value to you if you do that. If you watch the videos without having tried to solve yourself, you'll not learn much about yourselves as to where you're making mistakes and how to rectify the nature of mistakes that you're making in reading comprehension exercises. Right, so having said that, let's go to the questions directly. One by one, let's discuss the questions. So first question says, the author of the passage is likely to disagree with all of the following statements except. So double negative question, likely to disagree, except. So which means that we have to pick up that particular option as the answer which the author will agree with. So disagree, except means what the author is agreeing with. Let's read the options. Let's try to figure out which of these are definitely wrong first. Looking at option A, it says that if we accept liberalism is a dying ideal, we must work to find a viable substitute. Definitely the wrong answer, because the primary conclusion in the last sentence of the author is that this is not a funeral procession. Yes, liberalism is dying. Yes, liberalism is suffering. But the author is not looking for a viable substitute. The author is saying that we need to work in order to reform liberalism and again rejuvenate it. That's what the author says, that this is supposed to be a wake-up call and not a funeral. And that's why A cannot be the correct answer. The author will not agree with this at all. Looking at B. B says liberalism was the dominant ideal in the past century, but it had to reform itself to remain so. So the author is talking about reformation in the second to last paragraph. I think very, very possibly correct answer. So let's hold on to B. C says claims about liberalism's disintegration are exaggerated and misunderstand its core features. So this is kind of a critic of the work of Deneen by the author. So C can be the correct answer. So let's hold on to C as well. Let's read D. D says the essence of liberalism lies in greater individual self-expressions and freedoms. This has been pointed out by Deneen, but the author actually disagrees with it. So he says that here is Deneen, argues that the essence of liberalism is in freeing individuals from constraints. But the author says that in fact, liberalism contains a wide range of intellectual traditions. So the author does not agree that liberalism is only about one particular thing. It's about a lot of things, and that's why D cannot be the correct answer. Confusion between B and C is valid, but if we read both the options carefully, we can actually figure out one part of option C is probably not something that the author will agree with. And that is option C. Because if you look at first part of option C, it says claims about liberalism's disintegration are exaggerated. Now, does the author believe that whatever Deneen is saying is exaggerated about disintegration of liberalism? I don't think that he feels that it is exaggerated, because he clearly states in the very first sentence of the last paragraph that Mr. Deneen is right to point out that the record of liberalism in recent years has been dismal. So which means that it is disintegrating. It is suffering. So that part of this option, first part of this option, is not something that the author will agree with. So I'll eliminate C and mark B as the correct answer. Although second half of option C actually makes sense, that Deneen does misunderstand its core features. But one part of an option being wrong makes the entire option wrong, whereas B is entirely correct, and that's why B becomes the more correct answer than C. So one, I would say, is an easy to moderate question. I will not call it even a moderate question, because two options are very easy to eliminate. A bit of effort, if you put in to figure out which among B and C is more correct, we should be able to get to the correct answer of this question. Question number 2, though, probably was the toughest question of this entire paper of slot 2 CAT 2023. Toughest of this entire paper. Why? Because the question itself is a bit difficult to understand. Firstly, question says all of the following statements are evidence of the decline of liberalism today, except. So we have to first focus on the word except, which means that I have to figure out which sentence is not an evidence of decline of liberalism. So not an evidence, right? And the very important word to understand the meaning of, to answer this question, is the word evidence. What's the meaning of evidence? Evidence is proof. That I make a claim, I make an assertion, and then I give you evidence and proof or a particular instance to show that why my claim is correct. So we have to find which of these is not an evidence, a proof of the decline of liberalism. Let's look at the options one by one. Option A, I think, is the easiest option to eliminate, which says that the gap between liberalism's claim about itself and the lived reality of citizenry is now so wide that the lie can no longer be accepted. So this is talking about liberalism. it's giving us the evidence of how the lived reality of citizenry is opposite of whatever liberalism claims. So it is absolutely attacking liberalism, and that's why A cannot be the correct answer. The lived reality of citizen is being given as an evidence of decline of liberalism, and that's why A is an evidence, and that's why it cannot be the correct answer. B says technological advances are reducing ever more areas of work into meaningless drudgery. So this is talking about decline of working conditions of people, but then it is not related to liberalism. So I can keep this aside as possibly not uh, a possible correct answer. So let me hold on to B. C says the creation of a business aristocracy, the rise of vast empires. The author is, in fact, blaming the reason for decline of liberalism on old-fashioned greed and rise of vast companies and of aristocracy is an evidence, is a proof that the author is giving in order to showcase that how liberalism has devolved into a place where people's greed is being rewarded and nothing more. So I will say that C is not the correct answer as well. I think with hard thought, A and C can be eliminated. D, though, says democracy has disintegrated into a theater of the absurd. This also is not talking about liberalism directly. So answer is either B or D. Now, if we go back to the passage, what makes B and D extremely confusing and this question very difficult to answer is that both these sentences are present one after the other. This sentence says democracy has degenerated into a theater of the absurd. And this says, and technological advances are reducing ever more areas of work into meaningless drudgery. So which of these is an evidence of decline of liberalism and which is not? I think it's very difficult to figure out. I would not disagree with anyone who says that both look like an evidence of liberalism, or both do not look like an evidence of decline of liberalism. But what they have done is that they have actually said that democracy's degeneration is a direct result of the aloofness of the old aristocracy or the new meritocratic aristocracy, which has become similar to the old aristocracy and who have lost a sense of noblesse oblige, which means that they are no longer obliged to do the good thing. So democracy has declined because of that. So democracy's decline is because of decline of liberalism. And that's why this part is an evidence of what decline of liberalism has caused. Whereas the next one, reducing people's work into meaningless drudgery, this has been attributed to technological advances as the cause. So people's work going into or becoming meaningless drudgery is an evidence of advancement of technology. And that is why B is the correct answer and D is not, because democracy's decline is because of decline of liberalism. People's work quality declining is a cause of technological advancement. And that's the reason I believe that the paper setter has taken to mark B as the correct answer. But if you don't get a question like this correct, where all the sentences are picked up from the passage, all the sentences are kind of related to whatever the question is asking, I would be absolutely fine with. This is if you make a mistake in this, it's a very forgivable mistake. So 2, I would say hands down, is a difficult question. Diabolically difficult question. Okay, let's move on to 3. 3, though, I think is the easiest of the lot because 3 says the author of the passage faults Denin's conclusion for all of the following reasons. Okay, so he faults Denin's conclusion for all of the following reasons except. So faults Denin's conclusion is the key part of the question. So we have to find out which of these is not being used by the author to criticize Denin. We know that he finds 2 major faults with Denin's book. One is that he defines liberalism as having one single ideal, whereas it has got a wide range of ideals to it. That's one sense of criticism. And second is that Denin refuses to acknowledge that liberalism can reform itself. So if you look at options A and B, those are those very 2 sets of criticisms, and that's why A and B will not be the correct answer. Answer is either C or D. And D says it's extreme pessimism over the future of liberalism today and predictions of an ultimate decline. C says it's repeated harking back to pre-modern notions of liberty. If you go back to the passage, you will realize that D is what the author is criticizing when he says that this is not a funeral oration. Like Denin points out, this is a funeral oration, that it is the end of liberalism, but the author disagrees with it. But in the second sentence of this paragraph, he says that he is right to assert that the world has much to learn from the pre-modern notions of liberty as self-mastery and self-denial. So he is actually praising. Denin's pointing out to pre-modern notions of liberty. So that is not fault-finding. That is actually validating. And that's why C is clearly the answer, because he's talking about harking back to notions of liberty, something right that Denis is doing. And D, the author is disagreeing with, and that's why C is the correct answer. I would say that 3 is the only easy question in this entire lot. So 3 you have to get correct. 4 is a doable question, but a slightly tricky question. Question says the author of the passage refers to the Davos elite to illustrate his views on blank. The two parts of the question are very important to focus upon. One is author of the passage. Why that is very important to focus upon is because both Denis and the author are referring to the Davos elite. But the question is not asking about why Denis is talking about them. The question is asking about why the author is referring to them. Okay. And where is Davos elite present? Let's go back to the passage and let's read that part of the passage. Davos elite is being mentioned in this particular sentence, which says, biggest enemy of liberalism is not so much atomization, but old-fashioned greed. As members of the Davos elite pile their plates ever higher with perks and share options. So Davos elite are piling up their plates. They are greedy. They're piling up the plates with more and more money. A says the fact that the rise in liberalism had led to a greater interest in shared futures from unlikely social classes. Definitely not the correct answer, because A is kind of praising the Davos elite that they are leading to shared futures. But it's not shared futures. And in fact, shared futures is being mentioned in the part of the passage where Denis talks about the Davos elite. Okay. So here Denis is creating a shared future in a future fragmented world within quotes, which means that he's air quoting them, saying that they're claiming to do this, but they are not doing it. So he's pointing to that sarcastically. So A, number 1, is not the answer because it's saying something positive. 2, because it is being referred to by Denis and not by the author. So A is absolutely wrong. B says, the hypocrisy of the liberal rich who profess to subscribe to liberal values while cornering most of the wealth. Maybe they're greedy. The author is trying to point out towards that they're accumulating more and more wealth. So B can be the answer. C says the unlikelihood of a return to the liberalism of the past as long as the rich continue to benefit from the decline in the liberal values. Not the correct answer. I will eliminate this because of the first part of the option not being the correct answer. Unlikelihood of a return to liberalism. The author will not agree with this. The author is saying that we can return to liberalism. It can reform itself. So C is disagreeing with the core notion of the author, so C cannot be the correct answer. D, though, says the way the debate around liberalism has been captured by the rich who have managed to insulate themselves from economic hardships. Also looks like the correct answer. Now, it seems like B and D are saying the same thing. Both are talking about the liberal rich who are having a lot of economic benefits. Now, which of these is the correct answer? I will be absolutely okay with people being 100% confused with B and D and leaving the question or marking them, some of them randomly, and getting the question wrong by marking D as the correct answer. But here is where a small technique that is sometimes used by the paper setters to prove or to make one option wrong is that they write one option, which is directly what is said in the passage, and write another option, which is an implication of what is being said in the passage. See, again, let's go back to the passage. The Davos elite is being mentioned. Why? Because they are piling their plates ever higher with perks and share options. They are old-fashioned greedy. So they are piling their plates. They are having greed. So they're accumulating more and more wealth. B is talking about cornering most of the wealth. Whereas D is talking about insulating themselves from economic hardships, which is directly equivalent to piling your plate. B is, because cornering most of the wealth means that they're accumulating most of the wealth. D is a result of it, that because they've got so much amount of wealth, they are no longer going to have economic hardship. So D is a result of it. But B is saying that directly, and that's what makes B more correct than D. Definitely a moderate to difficult question. Among B and D, if you're marking D as the answer and getting this wrong, then that's an acceptable mistake. If you mark A or C as the answer and get this question wrong, then that's a very bad mistake. Overall, I think with a bit of care, 2 out of 4 questions can be correct. Question number 1 and question number 3, you can get correct. I think question number 4 also, with a bit of detailed thought, you can get that correct as well. Anyone who gets question number 3 correct, question number 2 correct as well, with proper reasoning, is someone who's destined for a 99.9 percentile, at least a 99.5 percentile in VARC, and anything less than that if you get, then that's going to be a shame on your part. Okay, that's going to be, I shouldn't say shame, that's a very harsh word, that should be much less than what you are capable of getting. Okay, so if in your first attempt with proper reasoning, you have gotten a question like question number 2 correct, that means that you have all the power, you have got all the skills required to ace the VARC section of the CAT paper. Thank you.